and many editions of the Best American Poetry and the Best American Essay Series. When not in residence, she teaches at Bennington College and the Bennington Writing Seminars. Jenny Boully's writing is mercurial in the best sense, unpin-downable, encapsulation-proof. With most of her books, if you were to ask me, is it fiction, nonfiction, or poetry? I'd probably say yes. But it's not just that she's a genre rebel, although she very much is one. She's also an explorer of the liminal, a harvester of the in-between, a tracer of the untouchable. She's also an artist that shapeshifts, not only from a given moment to the next, deftly pivoting between different registers, from the sincerely confessional to the heavily ironic, from the heartbreaking to the humorous, from the playful to the dark, and so on. But she also shifts radically from project to project, each markedly different from the one before. Just to touch on the variety within her work for those new to it, The Body is a book comprised entirely of footnotes to an implied but absent body text. One Love Affair uses source text from Dura, Walzer, Beckett, Bolaño, etc. to title sections that serve as titles/springboards for intersecting personal narratives. The Book of Beginnings and Endings is a collection of first and last pages of imagined books, no middles, not merely because of the unknown that was stalking toward them, which is available for purchase tonight. The narratives of Peter Pan and Wendy are bifurcated on every page with a subheading, The Home Underground, into which she dives into the subtextual strata, making them sing. Of the mismatched teacups of The Single Serving Spoon is comprised of self-owned failures, both of a romantic and a literary nature. The book claims, while renouncing her former forsaking of the line break, i.e. this book has verse in it. Betwixt and Between is an extended treatise on writing, much of it characterized by an oniric, meditative quality, as if spoken from inside a dream. And these are just the premises of those books. It's what they then do with each starting point that is most impressive. Jenny Boully is unquestionably one of the most innovative writers in the country, and for over 20 years, she has been expanding our notion of what writing can do. I'm not really one for grand claims necessarily, but she might well be our century's Gertrude Stein. Perhaps more than any other contemporary writer, she has ripped shackles off the essay and made us reconceive it in a sense with a far greater breadth and increased possibility. She's one of the most mischievous writers I can think of, and yet her books are anything but light. All of them drive at weighty philosophical questions, what it means to be a reader, a writer, a lover, a text, a woman, a child, a human, what it means to have a life, a death, a love affair, a loss of memory, an absence. Rarely do we walk away from such interrogations with clear-cut answers, but we do develop keener lines of inquiry and learn to ask better questions. In so doing, she dislodges us from the complacency we develop in our daily lives and how we know and think and feel. In fact, I'm constantly impressed with how thoroughly her work troubles the distinction between thought and feeling. I'd go so far as to say Boully's writing is often metaphysical in Eliot's sense that it finds the verbal equivalent for states of mind and feeling. Much of her work takes love as a main subject, often reminding me of Frank O'Hara's line, "I'm the least difficult person, all I want is boundless love." And that's often when I'm most in awe of her work, when mind and feeling find a perfect union in her writing. All that said, I want to close with the very best description of a Jenny Boully book I've ever read, which just so happens to come from a Jenny Boully book, her latest. She writes, dismissing some beach reading stuff, "You realize after a lonely while that you need a book that you want to spend the rest of your life with, a book that you can read and reread time and time again and love more and more each time, and realize as the book changes, as books will do, that you change too, and the book loves you back and is a winged thing." Dear audience, that is precisely the kind of book that Jenny writes again and again. Each is just such a winged thing. It is an honor to introduce you to Jenny Boully.
Thank you all so much for attending my reading tonight. I am just so honored by Professor Babbitt's introduction. It is the most beautiful introduction I've ever gotten. Thank you so much. It means so much to me to be here today, and that introduction is, wow. My life took a turn because of Hobart and William Smith colleges, so I'm indebted to this institution. I always will be, in the same spirit that I am indebted to the institutions I attended as a student. I sent a piece to the Seneca Review when I was a student, and it got rejected. And I sent it again, a different piece, and it got rejected. And then I sent about 20 footnotes from the body. And Jean Degata not only accepted it, but also reached out by postcard and helped me find a publisher. And I am just always so proud to say that is it okay to say I'm a part of the Seneca Review family? I feel like it's part of me. So thank you all so much for being here. I am just so grateful to be among the previous writers who have held this post, my heroes, my gods, so I'm so honored. I'm going to read you a piece from a memoir in progress that's titled, Close Cover, Strike Gently. If you're a smoker, you'll know where those instructions come from. Or, maybe you just like fire. So this is called Pet Cemetery. After finding pregnancy tests in my mother's bathroom, a bathroom that was not our bathroom, but a bathroom 300 miles from home, I want her to hurt. Or I want her to care. I tell her that I had a boyfriend, that this boyfriend was 18. She says, that's not good. She says, I shouldn't be with someone that old. I want to tell her that what she's doing isn't good, that she shouldn't be with someone so young. But I don't. I don't want to hurt her by letting her know that I know. So I say it's okay, we broke up, but I don't tell her that I too had to take a pregnancy test, that I had sex with this boyfriend, that I did it more than once, and that when I didn't want to, he tried to kill me and would have, if it weren't for another man who happened to walk in on what would have been my murder scene. I met this 18-year-old boyfriend 4 months before I visited my mother, 4 months before I left middle school. He was Rudy's cousin. Rudy was the other boy I dated, but Rudy had gone missing. Rudy called eventually. He was sorry for having gone so long, 2 weeks without calling, but he wanted me to understand that he could not have called because he had been in a knife fight and had been stabbed repeatedly. He had been in the hospital and was only now just out and staying with his grandmother. His family thought he should stay put at his grandmother's house so that he wouldn't again get stabbed repeatedly. He made himself toast on the phone as he explained all this to me. He was 16 and all stabbed up from a knife fight. He asked if I was still his girl. I said, sorry, but I can't be with the boy who's getting stabbed and consequently disappearing for 2 weeks. He said he was mad at his cousin. He said he knows his cousin had been calling me while he lay in an ICU receiving the blood offerings from strangers to save his stabbed up body. Everyone called his cousin Nympho, but we all had nicknames, names that covered and buried us. Nympho was a name that had not been chosen, we all of us knew, but rather a name that had been given on account of his having had almost all of the members of the polkas. The night before we met up at the pet cemetery, I asked him on the phone if it was true that he was a nymphomaniac. The sea green rotary phone had 2 prongs on the receiver like fangs, awaiting the phone's return or release. If he didn't have it, he would get murderous, he said. Nympho was already a bit murderous for me. He said the Ouija had pointed him towards me. In the downtown library, he splayed my hand on top of a stack of occult books and carved an upside-down cross in the web of it, proclaiming for all to see that I was something more than I was before. An alteration, you could call it. Together, we flipped through books containing charts detailing the boundaries of the darker world, how to draw them nearer, how to cast them out. Mally hated me. Not only was Mally a polka dot, she was one of the leaders of the polkas. The polka dots went around town on weekends to ensure that no one outside of the polka cult wore polka dots. At least to me, that is what they appeared to be doing. No one from the south side apparently was in the polkas. Sometimes we'd see them in small flocks within our boundaries, but mostly they clamored within the confines of their north side lives, north of Ingram, north of Crossroads, north of that big piano forever twirling on 410, north of Red McComb's Automotive, north of North Star Mall with its big cowboy boot that always marked a distance that to me was far. Mally was Joseph's girl, and she hated me because she could see how Joseph was pulling himself to me. It would not have been so heated if it weren't a question of my virginity, but there were hardly any of us left, and it meant something very deep to Joseph that he'd take that from me. He said he got a certain kind of power from having sex with a virgin. He said it had something to do with something he read in the Satanic Bible. He said it would be a great thing. He said he wanted to give this to me. I tried to understand what it was he meant by this great thing. I read the chapter on sex in the Satanic Bible and pretended I understood. Of course, the queen of the polkas would be the bride of the king of the Satanists. Joseph was the king of the Satanists, and it was known that he was a sex addict. Whenever we went out to fuck shit up on the town, he tagged Nympho for all the world to see. He tagged it snugly up next to mine, Scavy. A name that he did not know was given to me by Skinhead Joe. Nympho knew nothing about me and Skinhead Joe. I first met Nympho when he and Suedehead, Devo, Victor, and Barbacoa were getting off of a bus downtown. Like I said, we all had nicknames. It was a bus that Scotty and I needed to board to get back to the south side. They asked me for my number. I told them I was never home, so Suedehead gave me his number. Suedehead was into me. I was not into Suedehead. I was more into Devo, but Devo wasn't even looking at me. Rudy was a sweet kid. Suedehead was a bad nickname for him, but I guess he just didn't know what he wanted. He came over with Nympho and Devo and Barbacoa one day when my dad worked late. I just told him I'd be his girlfriend because I had already broken up with Skinhead Joe. They like hanging at my house because we can smoke inside, and my mom, having once been a bartender, left so many bottles. Later that night, long after they had all gotten home, Nympho calls me. I pick up on my sea green rotary phone. There's a cord that I have to keep inserted just so, or else I lose the connection. I love the sea phone green rotary phone. It makes me feel sexy and serious. I light black candles that have been inserted into bottles of Strawberry Hill and Country Quencher. I smoke Marlboro Reds and ash into a Burger King ashtray. I wear fishnets and cut-off shorts and 14-eyelet oxblood docs and black lace panties that my mother abandoned in her underwear drawer. I tell him, hold on a sec. I put on a record with the title Confessions of a Knife. I feel as if it's a serious thing to again pick up this phone, to once again, knowing it's him on the line, say, hello, sensing a hungry and murderous boy calling for me, and I've set the scene. My mother had been gone so long that I didn't know what to know about boys doing things to me. I sent her cards that I bought from the Wynn store, the 5 and Dime in the Valley High Mini Mall, where she once sewed clothes and made alterations, at the Singer store with her little feet and her little hands, coming into work wearing pleated skirts and rabbit fur jackets and snakeskin heels. In those cards, I begged her to let me go and live with her. I wanted a new life, a way out. I didn't realize that she herself also wanted these things. She was gone. She had a man who did things to her. I just wanted to be loved and touched and wanted, but only the bad boys, it seemed, wanted to touch me. And it was true. I only wanted the bad boys too. It was easy to acquire a copy of the Satanic Bible, written by Anton LaVey and first published in 1969. In my case, like my best friend Scotty, I was an extremely stealthy shoplifter. The thrill of taking was the thing that had worth. The occult sections of any Walden books or B. Daltons in the mall carried copies. One of the witchcraft books I stole had a love spell. I put a love spell on Nympho, even though I didn't particularly want him to love me. I just wanted someone to love me. I used rose water and a pink candle that I stole at Wicks and Sticks. When I lit it, I did what the spell informed me to do. I thought about him falling in love with me. The day after the love spell, Nympho calls to say that he's playing hooky and I should too. He comes over, we do a lot of fumbling around and nothing else really. When my father comes home, I hide Nympho in my closet until we can smuggle him into my father's car, which my older sister was allowed to drive. I plead with her to help me quickly get him out of here. She tells my father that she's taking me to a friend's house. I'm already in the back seat. Nympho slumped down at my feet. I don't even have to look my father in the eye. My sister and I drive all night trying to find our way home from Nympho's house. He lived so far into the north side that we didn't even know where we were. When we got home, my father was up already, waiting for us, dressed for work, waiting for the car. He had smoked a whole pack of cigarettes, mad as fuck, demanding to know just what the hell did we think we were doing. We drove over 300 miles, a distance that could have taken us easily to our mother. The plan was to meet at the pet cemetery. I had been there before with Scotty and a few other kids. The pet cemetery was in a wooded area right off Loop 410 near Bandera Road. If you didn't know it was there, then you wouldn't know it was there. Once you were there, however, it was like you always knew it was there, as if it were totally right for the world to have such a place right here, right off the highway, where you could go and be in the dark. You can't make out the tombstones or mausoleums. You can't see the highway, but you can hear it. There's a wooden table someone brought in. It's sturdy, covered with candle wax and graffiti. Other kids have left candles and empty bottles. We're sitting on the table and drinking country quencher that we fished for. Scotty and I had just come from the cinema where we watched a $1 movie to pass the time until we were supposed to meet Joseph. We watched The Little Mermaid and marveled at how it felt to be underwater in the theater. In the cartoon, there too was a cemetery, a field full of shrimp-like gray souls of shriveled merfolk who had made a foolish deal with the sea witch Ursula. The Little Mermaid, too, had made a bad deal with the sea witch. She had seen those shrunken souls. She had seen the consequence, but still she wanted to be something that she was not. She had to be something that she was not because she wanted a human man to love her. She wanted to live out the rest of her mer life away from her mer family as something that she was not. This little mermaid, like me, did not have a mother. Like me, she too feared the wrath of her father. Like me, she turned to witchcraft. She, like me, had a special place of emptiness that she needed to fill. This place of emptiness was made manifest through an underwater grotto, which she filled with dreams of things that would make her something that she was not. In this middle of this stream of things that would make her something that she was not was a man. Because of the man, the little mermaid was made bold in her decision to make the emptiness not a dream, but rather a real thing. That emptiness would soon be a real thing too with me. Before my mother left, she bought herself black lace panties. I had heard her return from late nights out. She'd come home after my father left work, which was usually around 2:30 in the morning. I could sometimes hear her vomiting all her drinks out. I wonder if my mother had started drinking because she felt that she had to be something that she was not. She was not American. She was just a little over 30. She was not ugly. She was not meant to be kept at home babysitting and sewing to make money. She wanted out. She asked to learn to drive. She asked to work outside of the house. She got her bartending license. She tended bar and came home late, all covered with ash and vapor and smoke. She sewed clothes in the mall at the Singer store. She did what the industry calls alterations at a Juki industrial sewing machine at Lackland Air Force Base. When I had to fill out my mother's occupation in school forms, I no longer wrote housewife as my father had previously instructed me. Now she was a seamstress, he said. She met many Thai airmen who were studying at the Air Force Base in the Defense Language Institute. She sewed on military patches. My mother swirled around the house all day in a delirious housewife dream, searching the rooms for something that she wanted to be there that was not there. And then one day, she herself wasn't there. Joseph had been my way out. He was the darkest thing that could take me away from me, and all that girlhood would be erased. I never erased anything on my pre-algebra test. There was nothing to erase because I wouldn't even try. All those numbers hovering like ghosts, all those missing numbers reduced to a death stare, the X of unknowing. I didn't even want to solve for the missing. I wanted the missing to keep being missing. Mr. Stout had a finger missing from the war. The kids joked that he was a fabulous math teacher. He would teach you that 5 + 5 was 9.5. Always laughs. Mr. Stout knew I would never master the math of plugging in solutions. Fractions in those equations were the worst. I could never understand how 1/2 times 1/2 could take me further away from being whole. All the problems were about a ghost. The problems were all about the missing, the unknown, an element that existed but didn't show itself. I was missing my mother. The pet cemetery had been abandoned. Anyone who had once loved these pets were no longer around to love them. When my dad's favorite dog died suddenly and unexpectedly, my father put the dog in a styrofoam cooler and dug a hole in his garden. He buried his little baby and made a tombstone of cement for it. It read, "Johnny, my friend." He took film negatives to Fox Photo and had a poster-sized picture of Johnny made. Johnny had been my father's fishing partner, and when Johnny died, my father didn't want to go fishing anymore. He laid back on the couch and smoked Marlboro Reds and watched reruns of Gunsmoke and MASH. I did not yet understand the look of depression, how depression is the same visual over and over again. Just that previous summer, I had been a somewhat okay girl. I was waking up early with my father to volunteer at the hospital downtown where he worked in the lab. Because he had to be in at 3:30 in the morning, I would wake up at 2:30 to get ready. On Highway 90 towards downtown, there was a billboard with chicken eggs, proclaiming that something was coming. A few months later, the image was replaced with eggs that were hatching. This progression of egg to chick went on for a while until the billboard proclaimed, along with its image of new chicks, that a new HEB, a super one, would be coming. It would be the super version of their grocery stores, and it would be built right by the pet cemetery. When I saw those billboards, I was still a somewhat good girl. I didn't yet know anyone who would even know anything about a pet cemetery. I woke up in the middle of the night to accompany my father to work, where I filed lab reports and delivered them to doctors' offices. I learned to drink coffee and read Stephen King novels in my downtime. Christine was a favorite that summer. She was a car that died that should have stayed dead, but wouldn't. By the time Joseph showed up to the pet cemetery, Scotty and I had drunk about a bottle of wine each. I had to pee really bad, but I figured I would pop a squat in the brush. There were a lot of brush piles, as if the whole cemetery were in the process of being cleared away. The cemetery was on a cliff, it seemed, and down below was the excavation site of the new Super HEB. The billboard eggs had all done hatching. Surrounding the cliff were piles and piles of high brush. Joseph sat and smoked a cigarette with us. I mentioned that I really had to pee. He said we could go soon. We were planning to drink and stay the night at some girl's place, some girl he knew who lived nearby. We were about to get going when we saw the lights of the cop car and heard voices. I followed Scotty and Joseph, who were running towards the piles of brush that we did not realize at the time were on the edge of a cliff. Scotty and Joseph both managed to climb the brush and jump off the cliff to evade the police. I, however, was not able to climb over the brush. Instead, I fell straight in. The police showed up with flashlights, trying to find whatever there was to find in the darkness. They could not find anything in the darkness. They got so close to me, I had to stop breathing or else be found out. I stayed hunkered down in the brush until Scotty and Joseph came for me. They pulled me out, a process that resulted in even more scrapes and scratchings. Michelle's home was like most girls' homes whose mothers were nurses who worked the overnight shift. It had its fuzzy brown floral upholstery, its gray and beige carpeting. We all watched television in the dark. Joseph kept kissing me and tonguing my ear until he said, "Let's bang." And so I followed him into Michelle's room, where he took off my clothes and laid me down on the bed. It must have been like doing it with a corpse. I hardly moved, I hardly made a sound. It was just what it was each time, and always I thought all the boys kept their pants on. I stay with Joseph for weeks. I see him on days when we play hooky. I go with my sister to the grocery store so we could buy the little things we needed. Only I didn't buy. I took what I felt was rightly mine. I needed a powder compact and hair stuff. I needed a pregnancy test. I walked through the aisles feeling rather distinctly like I was something that had once been. I couldn't deal with decimals. I couldn't deal with fractions. I didn't understand how to calculate when the numbers weren't whole. I hated the ghostly absence of the thing, the solve for the missing, the solve for the unknown. I became very much afraid of death around this time when I had just let the boy who believed he was the head of a satanic cult lay claim to my virginity. Girlhood was a concept that once was, if not wholesome, at least whole. When I am prone to periods of feeling sorry for myself, I quickly reverse course. I remind myself that it was I who cast the first stone. It was I who begged for the curse. It was I who asked to become nothing. I became then forever missing, forever unknown. My mother had gone into a crypt, a dark cavern, and covered its mouth with a stone. She had knowingly buried herself, had gone into the darkness rather than remain in the one she could at least have seen. It may have been a shady and hazy light, but at least she had the faces of her daughter in that dimness. The U-Haul had a peach on it. It said Georgia, but my mother was not going to Georgia. She was going away into her crypt, where she was destined to go because apparently the gods loved her. There was something to do. It lulled her. She said, okay. She said, enough. She said, fine. She said, I'll get out of your life. She said, no. She said, I'll go. She said, you know what I've done to you. She said, the girls will stay. We watched the U-Haul with my mother's world drive away. Finally, Devo, who I really loved, started to like me. I meet him and some friends at his house. I took my story of want and took it into his dark room. That story goes in with bottles of country quencher. It went in with an empty hand and black lace panties. Somehow, Joseph gets wind of where I am. He's coming. Devo's grandmother's house is down the block, and we run there. I thought I was safe, that he wouldn't find me, but he entered through a window. He pushed his way to me, grabbed my arm, and commanded I go with him. I said no, and pushed him against the kitchen counter, and pushed myself into the kitchen counter, into a corner. He opened a drawer and slammed it shut. He came to me with the knife. Devo and Victor are telling him no. Barbacoa runs out the door. Joseph comes to me with the knife. He's a man with a cloak. He's a man who arrives in darkness. He's a man who likes to hit go hard and repeatedly. Incise my tenderness, carve into me the various shapes of his vices, a grave, a gutted girl, upside down crosses. Devo's big brother with the teardrop tattoo, who had just gotten out of jail, storms in right as Joseph is coming to me. In the movie version of Stephen King's Pet Sematary, the mother is so grieved over her dead baby, she wants him back. So they bury it in the place where it will come back to life again. In the movie, the baby does indeed rise from the dead, but it comes back feral, murderous. I have not yet been able to bring myself back into the scene of the attempted murdering and come out alive. That is, I have not been able to relate in this space just what it was that occurred there in a corner so small it hurt to stick myself in. You could say I asked for it. The night sweats, the shakes, the nausea, the panicked breaths. You could say that I did, that I practically begged for it, that I wanted to suffer the sick shock of knowing. If not want, then what led me to search for him on the internet? I could not foretell the dread that would then ensue, the fear of what I'd done. I had seen again his face, and his face was still his face, and his face is still telling me, let's bang. Once again, I'm terrified of a space the size of a corner. I find him on Facebook. Apparently, he's a welder now. He uses flames, torches, to melt metal. He wields bars onto windows and doors. Apparently, he has applied his welding skills to restore an old hot rod, a matte black car with the look of a hearse, its engine of innards exposed. It is a car that died, that should have stayed dead but didn't. I should have known better, but I didn't. You could say I asked for it. I should have allowed the dead to stay dead. I died and should have stayed dead, but I didn't. I realize now that all this time I had simply been playing dead. I asked for it. I chose knowing and being known. After I turned 40, I went to visit the site of the former pet cemetery. The Sendero Assembly of God now entombs forever the dead animals, the site of illicit gatherings. In Spanish, sendero means a path made by people or animals. There's a little playground now, but there aren't any little kids. Just the ghost of me swaying on those swings. I see 3 kittens that the church must have taken in. They're feral, they scat. I enter the lobby and the Pentecostal pastor greets me. I ask him if he knows that a pet cemetery used to be here, if he knows anything about that. He's taken aback, says, yes, but we don't have anything to do with that. I ask if I can see the sanctuary. He denies me entry. He denies me entry as if he can see the darkness in me. He says, if you want to see it, you'll have to come here to worship. I tell him I'll be back, but I don't tell him I have a flight to catch on Sunday, that I'll never be back. I thought by keeping secrets I could be safe. I led the life of a stray, and then I took that stray and muffled her and sent her silently on her way. In Catholicism, there is something you can do to absolve your sin. It's called confession. So, here's my sorry attempt at that. I had bought black lace panties. I met a man at a certain time and certain place, a boy from my past that had come back. This essay is my way of explaining. Please, forgive me, I tell my husband. I'm still very much a dark and feral thing. I think my past can make these allowances for me, my wandering, my scatting towards my own self-destruction, but these things have a way of following me. On my way to the airport, I'm being followed by an old black hot rod. It grazes so close behind me, its vapors enter my car, choke my breath. I know there are scenes more eerily coincidental. I realize that there are more sinister signs that the world gives to remind that things will never resolve, that what haunts will keep haunting, will keep forever occurring. It looks like a car that's been buried and unearthed, a ghost steaming and black, like those old cars from the 40s, hearse-like and commanding, part hot rod, part antiquity, part solemnity. It's also matte black, a color that is, I've since learned, referred to as murdered out in the automobile industry. It looks like a car that's made of the pieces of many wrecks, a car that's been restored, brought back. Right when I pass the site of the former pet cemetery, it pulls up beside me, stays for a few seconds before speeding up and shifting lanes so it's right in front of me. Forever, I would have to follow that car. I would have to follow that car to hell and back. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a couple minutes for a Q&A. If people have questions you would like to ask Jenny. I can ask, or yeah, no?
Thanks, Jenny. That was amazing. I'm so happy you're here. We in my classes we were reading the On Writing and Witchcraft from Betwixt and Between, and we spent some time talking about your sincerity vow, the sincerity vow that you mentioned in that essay. And we were kind of thinking about the word sincerity, and in the classes, we felt like our definition of sincerity, the one that we brought to that, didn't seem to fit the way you practiced it. So I know this is a really specific question, but can you talk about what you mean in that essay and in general when you use the word sincerity?
Yeah, sure. Should I just go back to the mic?
Yeah, sure, if you don't mind.
So yes, this, I forget exactly how you said it, like the promise of sincerity.
Sincerity vow.
Sincerity vow. I love that. I want a shirt that says that. But so, I guess like early on, when I knew that writing had a lot of power, and I knew that writing could persuade others to give you something you want, that writing has that power, right? I tended to realize that I could use that power for good or bad. And I began to examine my motives for writing and why I was writing something. And I felt that in order for a piece of writing to be sincere, it ought to have no motives, right? And that you're writing something simply not to get anything back, right? That you're sending this out there with nothing, no expectation of anything in return, other than that you have taken this opportunity and, I guess, contributed to the arts and letters of what it means to be a human and have this existence in this life, and try to replicate that as truthfully as possible, right, in the mind through essayistic composition, which is where I feel most at home, in the displayment of my inner life, right? So no motives. So I can't write something because, I'm trying to get back at somebody, or I want someone to fall in love with me, or I think like somebody in class this week was saying like, I'm going to write something just so I can sound smart and like show the world how smart I am, right? Like there's motives involved in writing, so yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the essay you read, is this on? I must not. There we go. Thank you. In the essay you read, I was interested in the running motif of Stephen King novels. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about your relation to Stephen King or horror media in general, and how you see that potentially influencing your writing, like throughout your career.
Yeah, so I think, I wish I could say that I spent my childhood reading, Dickens and Moby Dick, but I really read what you could buy at the used bookstore in the mini mall, and so that's a lot of Stephen King. But they were so good, you just ate them up, and as a child, you feel, just so uplifted by the fact that you can finish an adult book. It's so gratifying to have that. But, Stephen King and Anne Rice, I read horror, around that time. And I would even consider my musical taste at that time to be part of this horror, right? So like the album I reference in that piece is My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, which is, but yeah, I devoured Stephen King books as a child. I think I like knowing that you have this element of fright that brings you close to like some sort of mortal edge, and what really matters comes out at that point. So it's a place to maybe get to sincerity again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, this reading was super, intimate and personal in terms of, what you're sharing. So how is approaching this format of sharing that information different than how you've done it in the past? And, what was that like for you, and what was the, point of that process for you personally of getting this memoir out there? What did it mean to you?
Yeah, so, I am writing about these experiences that took place, over 30 years ago, which seems very strange. And, I could have written a memoir much sooner, and, I mean, why did I sit on this material, right? People are probably finding out these things about me for the first time. And I just sat on this material because I was afraid to face it, right? You just have to be ready in those moments to just reckon with the self. And I think it takes a long time to forgive yourself, right? I think that on a daily basis, you have to remind yourself it's not your fault. So it just takes time, I think. You just have to come to a certain point where you just feel no shame. You're just not ashamed anymore, right? And this is I remember after I had my first baby in the hospital, I was just I'm not ashamed anymore. I was yeah, I'm nursing my, come in, I don't care, you got, residents, I have no compulsion, I just come in. So that's how I feel now in my life, in my writing. I'm yeah, no more shame, just come in. I'm going to let you in. You can see all the bad, all the ugly. You're right, but it's my life. It's fine.
I would like to preface by saying I absolutely hate talking in front of people and it terrifies me, but I really wanted to ask this question. When you, in your last line, you talked about like the black car following you to hell and back. Do you mean to say through that line that that person that you were a long time ago, like even though that you're like 40 or older now, that person is still like a part of who you are now, and you never really totally lost that person, even though it was in the past, it still kind of lingers around? Or is that, do you feel like that's like a separate part of you now and it doesn't really represent who you are now? I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
I just want to let you know that I'm always terrified of speaking in public. Always. So the moment that happened to me, like I'm just driving and I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me, right? Like did the cosmos just like draw the perfect symbol like in an essay? Because I was researching this for a long time. I planned this trip and did a whole bunch of archival work, found a lot of newspaper articles about the pet cemetery and stuff, but it just didn't work in the essay. But so when it happened to me, I immediately just couldn't believe the confluence. I couldn't believe that I knew that this person from my past restored old cars. There was one on his Facebook that looked very similar to this one. And I was passing right by the pet cemetery on my way to the airport. And I just thought, this is like the universe is trying to tell me something, right? And it's right in front of me. And I guess to answer your question, I don't think I could ever stop following that car. I believe there is something, I don't know, that just pulls me there. I just get very pulled into these paths. And so I think I'm taking a wait and see approach, because maybe life has a different path for me, and I just can't believe in it, can't see it yet, but for what I know right now, there's just like these dark areas that, are a part of you. So I guess it's just trying to manifest that darkness differently and transform it, I think is the focus.
Thank you so much to Jenny for such a wonderful reading and Q&A. And I did want to mention we tried to order books so that you could all buy them and have you sign them, but they are arriving tomorrow, unfortunately. So we do have 4 copies of Not Merely Because of the Unknown that was stalking toward them. I think I got that pretty close. And we have 4 copies of those, and then also there are coupons for 20% off. So you can use these at the bookstore. It says Jenny Boully on the back, and you can buy her books anytime from the bookstore. Also at future readings, we'll make sure that we have her books on offer as well. But if you could, please give it up one more time for Jenny.